Past the 8 o'clock hour, and Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program. Joining us now in the studio, however, and for the remainder of today's program, it is Mike Faher, staff reporter for VTDigger. You can also find his stories in the Brattleboro Reformer on reformer.com, as well as in the Commons, commonsnews.org. Always good to have you in here on a Tuesday morning, Mike.
Yeah, good morning.
Appreciate you coming in, and a lot of stories that are kind of continuations of other stories, right? I actually think that's part of the fun, and something I discovered doing talk radio is how much it's like a daily reporter. It's not like I have to have this packaged beginning and end of stories, but it's ongoing. And I think that is something that when you do daily reporting, you really rely on these stories to kind of have these sort of chapter serial-like qualities.
Oh, yeah, it's bread and butter. You know, you write a story, and then you just keep writing it for the next, 3 years. It's great.
Just go back and cut and paste paragraphs into the bottom of it, especially when you use that pyramid style. And a couple of those that we're talking about today, including the Vernon Elementary School trying to exit the Act 46 plans to consolidate I guess it's Brattleboro Union High School District 6 versus Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. I was actually thinking that yesterday when I was reporting on this, I maybe didn't have the exact district right. Basically, we're talking about BUHS District 6 here, correct?
Yeah, that's the legal entity that encompasses those 5 districts, and you know that's the entity that Vernon is looking to separate itself from, not Wyndham Southeast per se.
Right.
Yeah.
And Vernon voting to do that back in August, and that set up a vote for all the other member towns to vote on this, which ended up being in December. And all the towns except Dummerston voted to let Vernon exit. Dummerston said no, but they got a chance to do it again, as is the custom here, at least in the southeastern part of the state. If you don't like the vote, let's have another one here. And that one is taking place February 21st.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to be Australian ballot again, just like last time. And I think what they're hoping for, one of the things that the folks who are proponents of the Vernon exit are hoping for, is better turnout this time around. I think there were, as you noted last time, 666 total votes cast among the 4 towns on December 13th. So, and in Dummerston, there were fewer than 200 people who voted. So they're hoping that larger turnout might turn the result in their favor.
Yeah, well, and they have set up one public information meeting. This is February 13th, 6:30 p.m. at the Dummerston School is when that is going to take place. I imagine Mike Hebert is going to be at that meeting actively lobbying for Vernon.
Yeah, he told me that he definitely Vernon will be present. I don't know if there'll be any additional meetings between now and then. I think they really feel that in spite of all the public meetings and flyers that they did last time, that maybe people still didn't quite understand. So it's going to be another round of attempted sort of public education as to why, Vernon and really most of the supervisory union seems to think that this is, maybe the best thing for Vernon right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Other member towns who have been part of the Act 46 study committee were all fine with Vernon withdrawing from the plans, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, we should make the distinction that it's the leadership, the school leadership that has all sort of signed off on this, and there were definitely folks who disagreed with it, who were concerned there could be some financial implications, despite the fact that the supervisory union said that there would not be, and of course we saw that dissension in the Dummerston vote.
Yeah, well, and that's where a quote that is actually, I think, from a previous story that you had written about this, Mike Hebert, who's the chair of the school board in Vernon. I don't know if we identified him at the beginning of our conversation around him, but he had said Vernon has been kind of a pawn in those who oppose a regional school merger. Yeah. What are some of the issues there that he's referring to when he talks about Vernon kind of being stuck in the middle?
Yeah, I guess the idea is that folks who oppose Act 46 and who oppose the broader merger plans under Act 46 in Wyndham Southeast, that if you sink Vernon's ship here, then you sink the whole fleet. and we can't have a merger at all. And while I understand that line of thinking, the fact is Act 46 exists, and the fact is it pretty much forces you to merge in some way, shape, or form unless the law is changed. So the frustration of folks like Mike Hebert is, they say, look, we've researched this. This is right for Vernon, and don't insert other issues into this. This is just really about Vernon.
Right. And, it's interesting. These are all the kind of the vagaries of democracy, right? The fact that all the member towns had to vote to approve Vernon's withdrawal request and what they had voted on. But right now, we're not asking all the towns to vote again. We're just asking the one town that didn't get it right. That for some reason is an individual choice versus a district choice that they can choose to revote, but that doesn't necessarily apply to Vernon and Putney and all these member towns. It only applies to Dummerston. Each town, if they wanted to revote, would have to do that individually.
That's correct. It's the beautiful town-level centric government in Vermont, right?
And as if there isn't that layer of complexity to it, something that you unearthed for this story about the vote itself and the count of the vote, I found fascinating and makes me wonder if anybody audited the Jamaica vote in particular on this issue, but tell people and how you discovered this sort of little anomaly about what the vote, the amount of vote that has to be cast.
Yeah, well, there were these rumblings that, we can do this revote, but a simple majority won't be enough to get it reversed. And I had never heard this before, so I checked with the town first, and then with a couple of folks at the Secretary of State's office, and they confirmed for me that you need, of course, a majority of yes votes to overturn the no vote in December, but you also need this weird 2/3 thing where you need to gain, I'm going to try to get this right, because in writing it, it took me a few tries. You need to gain 2/3 of the majority in the previous vote in order to overturn that vote. So what that means is there were 100 no votes in Dummerston in December. You'd need now at least 67 yes votes in February.
Yeah,
to overturn.
That's my understanding of it. Well, and then those 67 yes votes have to outnumber the no votes this time around. So it would have to be at least 67, 66, but 66, 65 wouldn't get it done.
Right.
Everybody got that at home? It's very complicated stuff. Yeah. You spoke with the Secretary of State's office. Where did this come into play? I mean, do we know the origins of this little rule on 2/3 of
I was just thinking that I'd love to interview the guy who wrote that section of the statute, because to come up with that, it seems pretty. I guess I didn't get into the history and when that was passed, but I guess the issue is if you really want to overturn a previous vote, you need a strong level of interest in overturning it, and this is one way of numerically assuring that, but it seems so complex.
Yeah.
Almost needlessly complex.
Right.
Yeah.
So the vote, 100 to 84 against when it took place back in December. Mm-hmm. There are 107 signatures on the petition to have the revote. Yeah. Probably safe to say that means they have 107 votes in favor of allowing Vernon to exit this time. Not to say that, again, that more than 100 people won't come out in opposition to it, but I do anticipate that we will have a better turnout this time around just based on that petition. How about you?
Yeah, you'd like to think, but again, this is yet another special election that's sort of plopped down by itself as we had in December, and oftentimes that means low turnout.
Yeah. Never know the weather on a February 21st day.
Elections are hard to predict, as we saw in November, right? So.
And is that President's Week, or is that the week after President's
Week? That's right.
I wonder about that.
I think it might be the day after President's Day.
Well, we'll look that up while we're on the break here. We're talking with Mike Faher. You can find his writing on VTDigger.org, Reformer.com, and CommonsNews.org. More to come after the bottom of the hour news break. 20 degrees outside at 20 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Morning program with Mike Faher, reporter for VTDigger, as well as the Reformer and Commons, CommonsNews.org, Reformer.com, those web addresses. Did I do better with the bumper music this week, Mike? A little Who for you?
As long as it wasn't Rush. I'm still recovering from last week's Rush.
I was actually worried. I was like, I got to come up with better bumper music to make Mike happy this morning with all the stories that we're going to be covering. Let's stay in Vernon, although sort of staying in Vernon. The subject matter, Vernon, but the location, actually, Rockville, Maryland. This story that you put out It was in Thursday's Brattleboro Reformer about the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's public meeting about the sale of Vermont Yankee to North Star Group, from Entergy to North Star Group, January 24th, but not in Vermont, in Rockville, Maryland, NRC headquarters. And this raised an eyebrow for you.
Yeah, I think, I heard from some other folks, too, who are, involved in this issue, kind of scratching their heads a little bit, saying, why Maryland? I mean, of course, that's the NRC headquarters, so it makes sense for them. So there are two parallel permitting processes for this proposed sale of Yankee. The state's permitting process started last month, and this is the kickoff, the official kickoff of the federal permitting process. It's actually a review of the transfer of Vermont Yankee's license from Entergy to North Star.
Right.
And so this meeting, they call this a pre-submittal meeting, and it's a chance for the NRC staff and the Entergy and North Star and other folks to sit down and talk about what they're planning to propose.
Right, right. And it is, people can participate in it from afar. They provide technology to do that, or they provide the means for people. You still need your own technology.
Yeah, there's a teleconference capability. So you'll, as a member of the public, if you'd like, you can listen in. And apparently, toward the end of the meeting, there'll be a public comment Q&A. I don't know if it's a Q&A. I'm not quite sure of the format, but it's not the same as being there, and it's certainly not the same as having a meeting here, where a lot of the folks who are involved in this, interested in this, they're activists, whatever, could just show up and say their piece.
Right. Now, you talk about this parallel process, and this is probably, well, in fact, I know it's unique to Vermont in terms of the oversight they have over Vermont Yankee, even now that it's decommissioned in this sale process. So maybe the NRC doesn't feel it needs to have a hearing here, because regardless of whether there's a hearing here on the federal level, there's almost assuredly going to be a hearing here on the state level in front of the Public Service Board.
Well, one would think, although we haven't seen a schedule for how that process is going to play out. I know that they'll probably have technical hearings, which will be up in Montpelier, which is still closer than Rockville.
Yeah.
But it's. I don't know that the NRC thinks about the state's process very much. They're very much focused on what they do. And when I asked them why not here, they said, well, we've got all this staff. And the purpose of this meeting is to basically brief all these staff members about this very complex transaction. And it's very unique. It's maybe the first time this has happened or had been proposed, that it just makes sense to us to have it here.
Are there jurisdictional concerns? You spoke to Kate O'Connor in her capacity as chair of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. If the federal government says, yeah, we approve this sale, could North Star Entergy say, well, we don't need the state hearing, right? The federal government has already decided this overrules whatever the state concerns might be.
No, as I understand it, they are two separate processes, and they have to have not only the NRC's okay of the license transfer, but they have to have a certificate of public good. They have to have the state's approval for this sale to go through, and without that, there's no deal.
So no grounds for fighting that. I mean, and I'm not saying that they should be concerned that it won't be approved on the state level, but I could certainly see, and we've seen this before from Entergy, they get what they want out of the federal government, out of the NRC, and they're not getting exactly what they want out of the state, so they try to do an end around. Yeah,
no, I mean, I've gotten no indication of that. I mean, if now the previous fight over jurisdiction predates me, but from what I've read of it, a lot of the problem was that, or the argument was that the state sort of got itself involved in issues that were considered strictly the purview of the federal government, safety type issues. And as long as the Public Service Board doesn't see fit to do that, there is a very, they've got statutory basis to approve that sale.
Yeah. Now, Kate O'Connor said she's going to take part in that January 24th meeting via teleconference. Chris Campity, Wyndham Regional Commission, also going to be part of that. Do you think they try to get state officials involved in that meeting as well? Somebody from the Public Service Board?
Yeah, I'm sure someone will be. I think it would actually be someone from the Public Service Department, because those are the folks who are supposed to be the public's advocates in issues like this. Now, it's an interesting time up there in Montpelier, because there's brand new sets of commissioners and department heads, and so I did reach out to them and didn't hear back, but I think everybody's trying to settle into their new jobs. Someone at the Public Service Department, if they're new, has a lot on their plate right now and trying to deal with this Vermont Yankee sale.
Right, and also Kate is going to push to have a federal hearing somewhere in the state. Question is, does she have enough leverage to get that done?
Yeah, well, she says she's talked with all three congressional offices from the Vermont delegation and gotten the staff interested and involved, and there seems to be some push for that. And when the congressmen and the senators get involved, maybe things will happen.
Yeah. Certainly, Senators Leahy, Sanders, and Congressman Welch have all been active in the conversations around Vermont Yankee, so no reason to think that they wouldn't be in this instance as well. Yeah. All right, let's leave Vernon now for a moment here and leave the two ongoing stories that you tend to be covering. I thought it was an interesting little story you wrote about the Vermont State Police Barracks and the consolidation and some of the things they're doing. People hear consolidation and they think downsizing, but first and foremost, to me, this didn't sound like a downsizing as far as staffing.
No, the state police don't see it that way. It's sort of an administrative restructuring. I think the reason I wanted to ask about it and write about it was it certainly looked that way on the surface. They were essentially cutting the number of troops that they maintain from 4 to 2. But they say that does not mean any fewer troopers patrolling, any fewer local supervisors.
Right. In fact, the sergeant position to me sounded like somehow, even though they were consolidating the barracks from 4 to 2, they were actually adding this other layer of administration, but on a local level.
Yeah, it's very much a military style structure where you have at the local barracks level, that's where they say things really aren't changing. You've got the same number of troopers, and as you note, in fact, you might have more sergeants now, or at least more sergeant positions if they've all been filled. Where this change is occurring is really at the troop level, and that's the larger supervisory structure. Each of those troops had been governed by a captain, and they've only got so many captains to go around in the Vermont State Police. And so now what they say is that they've been able to take some of those captains and put them toward other initiatives like, fairness and diversity in policing and major crimes unit, things like that.
Right. I can understand when you first read, and in your second paragraph here, the story was in Wednesday's Brattleboro Reformer, the story, Troop B, covering from Brattleboro to Bennington, all the way up to Randolph and even Vergennes. I mean, that's a huge geographical expanse of territory. And then there's just one other troop for the northern part of the state. I could see where that would give people pause at first. But again, when you're talking about services and the different things that they do in the state, it really shouldn't impede any of their functions on a regular basis, should it?
No, I mean, I talked with a Major Rick Hopkins, who told me that, yeah, it's a big area. It's a challenge. He's done it and because when this was initially rolled out incrementally, and he sort of handled the southern part of the state for a few months. But he thinks with modern communications being what they are, and with the captain's roles being what they are, which is sort of a big picture supervisor, not day-to-day details, he thinks it's doable, and they think it's the right sort of use of the state police resources.
Yeah, and we know that they track everything on this level, so it'll be interesting to see a year or two out exactly how they feel that this new structure has helped them or hindered them as far as doing the work they do. Did you go up to Westminster and tour the barracks as part of this story?
I didn't recently, but I did last summer when they opened it. It's an impressive building. And I mean, honestly, that is a good example of what the state police have been sort of restructuring, consolidating. They've changed, decreased the number of barracks, the number of call centers. And so this troop thing, it can really just be seen as a continuation of that.
Yeah, the next level there. Finally, a story that you had in Monday's paper about Landmark College up in Putney extending their sphere of influence across Windham County with a bunch of different programs. Now, dual enrollment is something that Governor Shumlin really, really pushed as a big benefit for students here in the state of Vermont. It only makes sense to expand this to a place like Landmark College with the students that they serve and that student population. Although I wonder with the private college and the public school system, if that was a hurdle, why this hasn't happened before.
I don't think so. I get the impression that Landmark is growing, but it's growing slowly and at its own pace. In fact, I think right now they said they've only got 3, I believe, dual enrollment courses going, but they're hoping to expand that maybe in the spring or in the fall. I think this was a natural sort of growth step for them, but maybe they weren't ready to take it a year or two ago. They've been doing dual enrollment with BUHS for a couple of years now, but what this does is expands that out to 3 supervisory unions: Wyndham Central, Wyndham Southwest, and all of Wyndham Southeast. And it also includes some middle school programming, again, geared toward kids with learning difficulties, learning disabilities.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds like a big toe in the water with some of this stuff. I would actually think that the other part of this, the professional development part of it, when you talk about so many students now in public schools, as we learn, having the need for special attention or different kind of attention, different learning modalities, that professional development, I think, is probably going to be a really great resource for a lot of the local schools here and any of the supervisory unions that are taking advantage of it.
Yeah, when I talked with the Wyndham Southwest superintendent, that's one of the things he was most excited about. Obviously, he likes the opportunities for his kids, but he sees Landmark as a big-time resource for his staff in learning how to teach these students and learning how to develop special curriculum for these students. You know, they've got a research institute right on campus up there in Putney that a lot of people don't know about, but they're doing research every day into these types of issues, learning disabilities, learning difficulties, and how we can better teach these kids.
Yeah, they invested a lot of money in that STEM center, and it's great that they are making that as a resource to the different school systems in the community. Always great to talk to you about these issues on a Tuesday morning. Mike, anything that is coming up that you want to tease that's going to have your byline?
You stumped me, Chris.
Oh, you're done. That's it.
I'm
Fair
out.
All right. Well, I'm sure something will come along. It is the news game after all. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings after these messages.